No tak nie przyjechali.
Przyjechali?
Tak, no tam zgłosili plakaty i nie przyjechali. A najlepszy był taki z Wielkiej Brytanii, co z konferencji trwa 5 dni, on specjalnie przyleciał jeszcze na ostatni dzień z Beneluxu gdzieś i nie miał plakatu, bo mu nie przyszedł na lotnisko, był za duży. We wrześniu w Krakowie, nie?
No wiesz, teoretycznie mógłbyś wysłać można powiedzieć, że wziąć tak ten
Our next speaker is Piotr Zakrzewski from University of Warsaw. He'll talk about countably meager sets.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me. Let me also stress that the main results come from joint papers with Roman Pol and Tomasz Weiss. By the way, can you hear me? Okay. Okay. So as you can see, the title concerns perfectly meager sets. Okay, so throughout this talk, let X be a Polish, that is, separable, completely metrizable space without isolated points. And let me recall this very classical definition. A subset A of X is perfectly meager if it has relatively meager intersection with every perfect subset of X. So as I said, it's a very classical definition, one of these small special subsets of the reals, or more generally of such spaces, in particular totally imperfect, containing no perfect sets. And let us note that equivalently, set is perfectly meager if for every perfect P, we can cover it by an F sigma set in X, F sigma in X, that has meager intersection with P. When if A is perfectly meager, then you can cover its intersection with P by an F sigma in P, meager in P, and then the complement of P is open, so it is F sigma. Okay, so let us compare this to such a definition. Slight change. We say that A is countably perfectly meager if we can do, well, the same, but now we have a countable collection of perfect sets, right? And of course, perfectly meager set has a meager intersection with each of them. But the point is that we want to cover it by F sigma, which works for all PNs at the same time. Right, so it seems like a natural strengthening, and the question is what are the connections between the two classes? So let me put things in a broader perspective and start from recalling some basic properties of perfectly meager sets, basic facts. So the good news is that many classical small sets are perfectly meager, like lambda prime sets, and particularly in the Hausdorff gap. So the point is that these sets are, well, big enough so that there are ZFC uncountable examples, right? As for example, Hausdorff gap sets with the Hurewicz property, which do not contain perfect sets. So in particular, in the set of cardinality less the bounding number, and the Sierpiński set having countable intersection with every measure zero set in the Cantor space, and then the gamma set. And now there are two well, bad features. Wozin defined so-called Wozin function, and this is a injective continuous function on the Baire space to itself, which transforms every Wozin set, that is set having a countable intersection with every meager set. So in particular, Wozin sets are non-meager. So Wozin function transforms every Wozin set onto perfectly meager set. So if there is a Wozin set, which is the case under continuum hypothesis, then the class PM is not closed under continuous injective pre-images, because there are perfectly meager sets which contain images of Wozin sets under Wozin function. Okay, and well, this is a Gdansk accent, one of the Gdansk accents in my talk. Retzław proved that consistently there exists two perfectly meager sets whose product, Cartesian product, is not perfectly meager. This was this way Irek Retzław answered a long-standing open problem by Szpilna and Maczewski, asked in the 30s. So why are these, as I said, bad features? Well, you see, these perfectly meager sets have been viewed as a topological counterpart of another class of small sets, that is, those of universally null, which are subsets of X, which have measure zero with respect to any Borel finite measure on X. And the class of universally null sets have both these properties that perfectly meager sets lack. That is, this class is closed under continuous injective preimages, and it is also true that every product of two universally null sets is universally null. So there is another class, that of universally meager sets. Well, a set is universally meager if it is meager with respect to any Polish topology on X, giving the same Borel structure on X as the original one. And equivalently, set is universally meager if it does not contain any injective, even Borel image of a non-meager subset of any perfect Polish space. So by this characterization, this class of universally meager sets is, of course, closed with respect to taking continuous injective pre-images. And now let me another Gdansk accent. These sets were earlier recognized and studied as actually two apparently different separate classes of absolutely of the first category and AFC bar sets by Edward Grzegorek. And let me give you now a summary of basic facts about this class, universally meager. So first of all, it is clear that every universally meager is perfectly meager, right? Also, it is nice that all classical perfectly meager sets are universally meager as well. So in particular, there is an uncountable universally meager set in ZFC, but also this is a very nice theorem of Grzegorek that there is a universally meager set of cardinality non-meager, the smallest cardinality of a non-meager subset of the Cantor space or X, any Polish perfect X. Of course, consistently universally meager constitute a proper subclass of perfectly meager because, as I already told you, the image of a Wuzin set and a Wuzin function is perfectly meager, but not universally meager because it contains such the image of a Wuzin set, which is not meager. In the paper in which I introduced this name, universally meager, I also proved that any product of universally meager sets is universally meager. So this makes this characterization I started from, and this fact makes this class of universally meager maybe a better counterpart to the class of universally null sets. The two have many things in common. Tomek Bartoszyński proved that consistently, however, the two classes are the same. This is true under axiom P introduced by Tomek, stating that for every non-meager subset of A of the Baire space, there exists a perfect compact copy of a Cantor set of P such that the trace of A on P is non-meager in P. Yeah. So under this axiom, which is consistent with ZFC, the two classes are the same. So this is the second part of the answer to Marczewski's problem, because if the two classes are the same, then in such a situation, the class of perfectly meager sets is closed with respect to products, because this is true for universally meager. Hey, let me give some more equivalences. Well, this one looks maybe technical. The point is that A is universally meager by definition if it is meager in every Polish topology on X, giving the same Borel structure. Now, the second part says simply that it is enough to check this for any extension of the original topology to that of the topology of the Baire space, right? Okay, so now let me come back to the collection from the title. So a set is countably perfectly meager if it can be for any countable collection of perfects. There is a single F sigma set covering X, which has meager intersection with every set from this collection. Okay, so this class actually first appeared then without any specific name in a paper by Tomek, where it was claimed that this property characterizes universally meager sets in the Cantor space. So this was an attempt to give such a nice characterization of universally meager sets. When unfortunately there was a flaw in the part of the argument showing the inclusion universally meager are countably perfectly meager. And let me now show you a summary of basic facts about countably perfectly meager this time. So first of all, Tomek proved that every countably perfectly meager is universally meager. So the picture now is every countably perfectly meager is universally meager, and every universally meager is perfectly meager. And consistently universally meager and perfectly meager are the same, right? Again, many classical perfectly meager sets are countably perfectly meager. Again, lambda prime, so in Hausdorff gap, totally imperfect sets with the Hurewicz property, and so on. And now I'd like to say about one more class of perfectly meager sets, namely those subsets this time specifically of the Cantor space, which are perfectly meager in the transitive sense, meaning that for any perfect set, there is such an F sigma cover which is meager on every translation of P. I think these were introduced and studied by Andrzej Nowik, again from Gdansk, and Tomasz Weiss. So these sets are also countably perfectly meager, and so in particular meager additive, strongly meager sets, right? Okay, and now of course, since perfectly meager are universally meager, then consistently they are different. Countably perfectly meager, sorry, are universally meager, then follows that consistently countably perfectly meager form a proper subclass of perfectly meager. And in our paper with Roman Paul, we proved that this class is closed under products. And let me also state such a characterization of countably perfectly meager sets in the Cantor space. So A is countably perfectly meager. Look now, in a moment I recalled the definition of a perfectly meager set in a transitive sense. So this is very much like in that definition, but now we are testing this meagerness on every translation of P by rationals. So there exists, for every perfect P, there exists F sigma F covering A such that the trace of F on each translation of P by a rational is meager. So it's like restricting the definition of countably perfectly meager to countable collections of this form, of this specific form. Translations by the rationals of a given perfectly meager, of a given perfect set, right? Okay. But actually, consistently, it is a result from our paper with Roman Paul. There is a countably perfectly meager even lambda prime set, which is not perfectly meager in the transitive set. So sense. So it is true that this this holds, but it is not the case that for every perfect there is F sigma such that its intersection with every translation of P is meager. Another characterization, A is countably perfectly meager for any perfect Polish topology tau giving the original Borel structure of X. Well, in the definition of universally meager, the rest of the sentence would state that A is meager in tau. Okay, A is meager in tau. Whereas here we have a cover by countably many sets, which are indeed tau meager, but also closed in the original topology. In the original topology, not in topology tau. And another characterization, again, for every continuous bijection of the Baire space onto X, there are closed sets Fn in X, in the original topology. So this is to be compared with this fact, statement characterizing universally meager. Actually, I think this is just the definition as I stated it during this talk, and this characterization. So I'm showing this to you to stress that the two classes, countably perfectly meager and universally meager, are indeed very close. They seem really very close. Okay. The main results. Well, I think they might be expected. Namely, the two classes are consistently different. This was proved in our paper with Roman Paul. Consistently, there is a universally meager set which is not countably perfectly meager. And more precisely, this is true if there exists a universally meager set of cardinality of the continuum. So if there is a universally meager of the cardinality of the continuum, then there is also one which is not countably perfectly meager. So in particular, by the result of Gregorek, this holds if non-meager is a continuum, because then by the results of Gregorek, there is a universally meager set of cardinality, the continuum. So in particular, this is true under CH and MA, and under such hypothesis, the three classes, namely countably perfectly meager, universally meager, and perfectly meager are different, right? And the second theorem comes from a recent, yet unpublished article by Tomasz Weiss and myself. And this says that if continuum is at most Aleph 2, then already the classes of universally meager and countably perfectly meager are different. There is a universally meager which is not countably perfectly meager. Okay, so now I think I still got some minutes, and maybe I will give you some idea of proof of one of these theorems. Actually, I've hinted the ideas of proofs of both theorems, so they are in my slides if you are interested. You can look at them, but I think I will skip the sketch of the proof of the first theorem. What are these signs? These sounds. I don't know. Sorry? I see. Okay. I see. Okay. So maybe let me give you a short idea of a proof of theorem 2. So this is the one stating that if the continuum is at most Aleph 2, then the two classes, countably perfectly meager and universally meager, are different. Okay, so we shall split the argument into two cases. One is non-M equals Aleph 2. So if non-M equals Aleph 2, then under the assumption that continuum is not greater than Aleph 2, this means that on non-M is actually Aleph 2. So by the result of Grzegorek, there is a universally meager set of cardinality, a continuum, and it follows from our result with Roman Paul that then there is a universally meager set which is not countably perfectly meager. So yeah, this is so we are left with the situation when non-M is Aleph 1 and then B is also Aleph 1, the bounding number. And this is the new part of the argument, namely, we take T, a universally meager set of cardinality Aleph 1 with some additional properties strong enough for the argument to work. More precisely, this assumption, I think it was done by Skippers, I'm not sure, but it gives us a set of Aleph 1 many infinite subsets of the natural numbers, which is unbounded and increasing when looked at, when viewed as the subset of the Baire space consisting of increasing enumerations of these subsets of n. So it is increasing and unbounded in the sense of the ordering of eventual domination in the Baire space. And also, if B is greater than alpha, then X sub B, if beta is greater than alpha, then X sub beta is almost contained in X alpha. And there are two infinite subsets of N. So almost contained means contained up to a finite set. And now we let T, this special universally meager set, to be this X. So on again, this X with the rationals. Okay, and it turns out it is easy that this X is concentrated on Q in the sense that every open set containing Q almost contains X. and by a result of Schipper's, T has one of these covering properties, this time S1 gamma gamma, namely for every sequence of open point cofinite. Sometimes these such covers are called gamma covers. So infinite covers such that every point belongs to almost all open sets from the cover. There are sets U0, U1, and so on from these covers, which again form a point cofinite open cover of T. So these are the special properties of the set T needed for the rest of the construction. In particular, T is universally meager, and then the assumption that non-M is Aleph1 gives us a non-meager subset M of cardinality Aleph1, and then we take the graph of any bijection between T and M. And apparently this works. So T is the injective continuous image of H under the projection. H is the graph of a function with the domain T. So H is universally meager, but then the proof is completed by showing that it is not countably perfectly meager in the product. Well, actually, the proof there are some technicalities, and I think I will skip them. But they are in my slides if you want to. So problems, of course, there are two problems. Is are the two classes consistently the same? Maybe the two classes, countably perfectly meager and even perfectly meager, are consistently the same. I don't know. So thank you for your attention.
Any of these studied under the
I have no idea. Actually, no. I don't think so. I think I would come across such. But
So the remark was, there was a suggestion from some of the audience that we asked the mic. There's the questions for us.
So, do you want me to say something, because I haven't heard you at all?
No, you wanted me to ask the question again.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Okay. Well, I managed to carry this. I think this is a success. Quite heavy, actually. Okay, thank you.